When you hear the words death row, what comes to mind? Maybe hardened criminals, career killers, or men and women with decades of violence behind them. But what if I told you that some of the youngest people ever sentenced to death weren't even old enough to drive a car, or in some cases, weren't even teenagers yet? These aren't just dark corners of history. They are stories of childhood cut short by the justice system. In this true crime series, we're going to explore the youngest child death sentences of all time. From colonial America, where a 12-year-old girl was hanged, to the Jim Crow South, where a boy barely in high school was executed in the electric chair. We'll also look at cases where children came terrifyingly close to the death penalty, only to be spared at the last moment. By the end, you'll understand not just the crimes, but also the fierce debates over morality, justice, and age that continue to echo in America today. Hello, welcome to the Serial Crime Chronicles. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button now. Stay updated on shocking true crimes that rarely see the light of day. Stick with us till the end as we uncover another chilling mystery. Our story begins in the late 1700s. America was still a new nation. Laws were harsh, and children were often treated as miniature adults in the eyes of the court. This was the world that 12-year-old Hannah Ocuish was born into. Hannah was a Native American girl of the Pequot tribe living in Norwich, Connecticut. In 1786, she found herself accused of a crime so brutal it shocked the community, the murder of a 6-year-old girl named Eunice Bowles. How does a society deal with a crime committed by a child? Was Hannah truly capable of understanding her actions, or was she treated more as a symbol than as a child in need of help? The story unfolded on July 20th, 1786. Little Eunice Bowles was found dead, her body beaten and strangled. Suspicion quickly turned toward Hannah, who was known to have had a quarrel with Eunice earlier that day. When questioned, Hannah confessed, at least partially, saying she had lured Eunice into the woods and struck her. To the community, this was enough. At just 12 years old, Hannah was placed on trial for murder. But this wasn't a juvenile hearing. It was a full adult trial in a colonial courtroom. Witnesses described the crime as premeditated and cruel. The jury didn't hesitate. And so the shocking verdict came, death by hanging. On December 20th, 1786, Hannah was marched to the gallows, her small frame surrounded by a crowd of onlookers. Records say she prayed and wept as the rope was placed around her neck. When the trapdoor fell, Hannah became the youngest confirmed person ever executed in American history. But Hannah's story is just the beginning, because history didn't stop there. As America grew, so did its justice system, and yet cases of children condemned to die would appear again and again. To truly understand the weight of this issue, we need to leap forward more than 150 years to the segregated South in the 1940s. There, a boy named George Stinney Jr. would face the electric chair at just 14 years old. His story is one of the most infamous and most tragic miscarriages of justice in U.S. history. How do you manage being a child and accused of a brutal crime at the same time, tried in a single day, and executed before you've even reached your 15th birthday? That was a reality for George Stinney Jr., a boy whose name has become synonymous with wrongful convictions. The year was 1944. We're in Alcaloo, South Carolina, a small mill town divided sharply along racial lines. George Stinney Jr. was a skinny 14-year-old African-American boy who lived with his family in a segregated neighborhood. On March 23rd, two young white girls, Betty June Binnicker, age 11, and Mary Emma Thames, age 7, went missing after riding their bicycles near George's home. Hours later, their bodies were found in a ditch, both suffering fatal head wounds from a railroad spike. Who could have committed such a heinous crime? The town wanted answers, and fast. And in the Jim Crow South, that often meant suspicion fell on the nearest black face. George and his sister were reportedly the last ones to see the girls alive. Police quickly zeroed in on him. He was arrested, interrogated without a lawyer or his parents present, and within hours, police announced that George had confessed. No written confession was ever produced. No physical evidence tied him to the murders. Yet within just 81 days of the murders, George Stinney was put on trial. To keep up with this series and even more interesting true crime stories that never came to light until now, hit the red subscribe button. Now back to the story. The trial lasted a single day. The defense attorney called no witnesses. The prosecution relied entirely on George's alleged confession. An all-white jury deliberated for barely 10 minutes before returning with a guilty verdict. The sentence: death by electric chair. George was so small and frail that on execution day, June 16, 1944, prison staff had to seat him on a Bible just so his head would reach the electrodes. The straps of the chair hung loose on his tiny body. When the switch was thrown, the current surged through him, and his body convulsed violently. George Stinney was declared dead at just 14 years old, the youngest person executed in the U.S. in the 20th century. For decades, George's case haunted historians and civil rights advocates. How could a child be sentenced to death so quickly, with so little evidence? Was he truly guilty, or was he a scapegoat in a town desperate for justice? The mystery deepened as new evidence surfaced, suggesting George may have been innocent all along. In 2014, after a re-examination of the case, a South Carolina judge vacated George's conviction, declaring it a grave injustice. But that ruling came 70 years too late. George's tragic story made one thing clear: age and race often decided justice in America. But not every child faced the death penalty head-on. Some were spared, barely, and their stories will continue to spark fierce debate about whether children could truly comprehend the crimes they committed. One of the most famous examples: an 11-year-old girl in England who became known worldwide as a child killer, Mary Bell. We've seen children executed in colonial America and the Jim Crow South. But what about cases where children were spared the death penalty, yet still committed crimes so shocking that the world never forgot their names? Newcastle, England, 1968. Mary Bell was just 11 years old when she was arrested for the murders of two toddlers, Martin Brown, age 4, and Brian Howe, age 3. The killings were cold, calculated, and disturbingly deliberate. Mary strangled both boys and, in Brian's case, even carved an M into his stomach with a razor. These weren't accidents. They were acts of violence far beyond her years. What do you do when a child becomes a killer? Should she be treated as a victim of her own environment or as a monster capable of cruelty beyond comprehension? The trial in 1968 was explosive. Mary sat in court, small and pale, her hair in pigtails. The press dubbed her the child killer, and the public wanted blood. But in England, the death penalty had been abolished for minors. Instead, Mary was convicted of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility and sentenced to life in detention. She was eventually released in 1980, at just 23 years old, given a new identity, and allowed to disappear into normal life. Mary's case raises haunting questions. Could a child be inherently evil? Or was she the product of severe abuse, neglect, and trauma from a mother's violent lifestyle? And more importantly, did she deserve a second chance at life when her victims never got one? And Mary wasn't alone. In the U.S., cases like Lionel Tate's reignited the debate. At age 12, Lionel was convicted of killing a 6-year-old girl in Florida in 1999. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, the youngest in America to ever receive such a sentence. Though later overturned, his case pushed the justice system to reconsider how Young was too young for such harsh punishment. From Hannah Ocuish hanged at 12 in 1786, to George Stinney executed at 14 in 1944, to Mary Bell and Lionel Tate spared but forever infamous, the stories of children sentenced to die force us to confront the darkest corners of justice. And here's a question I'll leave with you. Should age ever excuse murder? Or are there crimes so severe that even a child should pay the ultimate price? If this story sent chills down your spine, don't walk away. Subscribe now and hit the bell. Join us as we uncover the hidden truth behind shocking crimes like this one, and see for yourself how appearances can be deadly deceiving. Stay with us till the end. You won't want to miss what comes next.